Hello, I'm Superintendent David Brown of the Chicago Police Department, and I'm here with Alexa James with NAMI. Hello, Alexa.
Hello, Soup. How are you?
I'm well. Just tell us a little bit about yourself for the audience. What is NAMI? How are you helping the Chicago Police Department?
Well, NAMI stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the Chicago chapter. We are a very proud partner of CPD and law enforcement for, I think, almost 16 years.
Wow.
So we started training with you all, CIT training, and doing some curriculum and jumping in here and there. And what we noticed was your police officers, just like everybody else, are managing a tremendous amount of stress and trauma, and we needed to rework our engagement a little bit and really think about what are we doing to support your officers' wellness or officers' wellness generally. So that's my current role and privilege to be with you today to talk about that.
I think if officers are not well, it's almost impossible to do reform, to de-escalate, to really embrace the training and the changes that society is placed upon policing, along with policing traditionally and investigations. So I think officer wellness is a key component of getting everything else done as it relates to current day policing. What's your thoughts on what are some of the best practices as it relates to officer wellness?
Well, I think you've already said it. Acknowledging that in an organization of this size, whether you're a small company or a big company, we need to highlight the importance of our people, which is our programs, our product. And we need to enhance their wellness because they'll be better at their work, they'll find more meaning in their work, and they'll have more initiative around what is such a difficult time to be the police, right? But I think one of the biggest practices is that we start with leadership, and leadership has to say that this is a priority, and it's going to mess things up a little bit. It's going to muddy the waters when we start to kind of create an organization that thinks about officer wellness from a holistic perspective.
You said something in your answer that really prompts me to talk about what law enforcement is facing in the current landscape, the current political environment, where we're in a global pandemic. Unemployment is at its highest since the Depression. People are feeling depressed, anxiety about not only the economics, whether they have a job to be able to provide for their families. What effect on just your average cop has all of this had?
I think it's huge. Yeah. I think that we talk a lot about meaning and purpose and how they have to self-actualize, they have to come together, they cannot be incongruent. If they're incongruent, you don't feel well, you feel unsteady. I think people get into this police work, to be helpful. I think there's a misconception that it's because people are power hungry or whatever. I think people get into this work because it's an honorable profession. And I think that's meaning, that's your individual meaning. When the purpose, it doesn't align, the community doesn't respect you, they have categorized you as like an evil group of people. They have their own thoughts and feelings about what it means right now to be the police, because we have asked them to do so much work outside of scope that they were never anticipating doing, and maybe they didn't have all the right skills. And they're grieving too. I mean, I think that what we forget is they're experiencing civil unrest and COVID and joblessness and huge levels of grief, just like we all are. The difference is I can stay in bed all day if I want to. They can't. Right. And not only can they not stay in bed, they're working more. Right. And they have more pressure on them, and there's so much more headline risk for all the work they do. So I think it's compounding, and I think the stress must be unimaginable.
Right. So, everywhere in the country, we're seeing in every large city and small, large increases in violence. Here in Chicago, we're experiencing that, and we're experiencing unprecedented violence against police. Yeah. Over 78 police have been shot at or shot this year. That's unprecedented. Over 300% increase over last year. But despite all of those things happening, being physically attacked by someone trying to shoot and kill you in a 300% increase over last year, officer wellness becomes so critical.
You have a pretty remarkable professional counseling division that has worked historically with very few clinicians for a very large department. I mean, almost 13,000 members, and their families, and retired officers, right? I mean, it's huge. Right. Fortunately, they have more. So what they're seeing is they're doing individual counseling. A lot of it is teletherapy right now, because folks.
How does that work? Teletherapy. Tell me.
So it's almost like a FaceTime. So they're Zooming with people. Now, not a lot of people want to connect that way, so there is ability to come in and do in-person counseling. There's peer support, so there's wonderful officers throughout the department who want to help each other. The best thing to do is to talk to somebody with a shared lived experience. The fact that you have a robust peer support program here is great, and we hopefully we get to strengthen that as we move into strategy. And there's the chaplains unit. You know, there is an a la carte menu for folks who prefer to have a substance use counselor or an individual therapist or peer support or chaplains, which is really great. Now what do we do to expand this notion of wellness, to bring it outside of just direct service and therapy, and think about it in all aspects of the department interaction?
Yeah, you know, this stigma of typical cop is, you know, it shows a sign of weakness if I need help, or if I need to talk to someone, or if I need counseling. And we're trying to get past that stigma. We're trying to make it okay to ask for help from a peer or a professional. And that stigma cuts across professions, right? There's such a stigma to saying I need to talk to someone.
Sure. No, absolutely. And I think that it was fear-based too, because for many years there's been this myth that if you're law enforcement and you seek mental health services, it is going to impact your employment in some capacity. But I think that speaks volumes, right? That the police culture and the police profession is so meaningful to the individual that they choose that over their wellness. So that, hopefully, that stigma has been dismantled. But there's also stigma within cultures. We see in the Black culture, with women, with men, in the Latinx community, that there's different layers too of stigma. So think about that compounding with a first responder community. And it's hard. It's hard to get people to help seek, although you wouldn't feel that way when you look at the referrals coming into the EAP, the professional counseling division, because they're significantly higher since COVID. So it's good. It means that more people are comfortable seeking services.
So the spiking in our members seeking counseling, we see as a good thing.
Yes.
That without that spiking,
Yes.
when you know they have this environment,
Yes.
means we're not doing all we can do to make the offering of help to our members.
That's a really good point, Superintendent, because oftentimes we think, is it good that more people are asking for treatment,
Right.
or does it mean that they're sicker? But no, I mean, everybody should think about this as just a general tool for maintenance of their health. Just like people should be working out, 3 to 5 days a week, they should be checking in with a professional just to kind of debrief their day.
Now, one of the things I talk about when I try to advise other leaders in the police profession is that just remember you're in the people business, not just the police business. You're in the people business, and we have to show that we care about people. And if we want our officers to treat the public in a certain way, in a positive way, we have to treat our officers that way.
That's right.
So wellness is really part of our job in making our employees more accessible to the public, more attentive to their concerns, and more respectful in doing their job.
Right. Right. I mean, it's part of professionalizing your department. I mean, it's part of reform, but it's also just part of your agenda. You want to make sure that your officers have access to resources that make them feel professional, that their training is it like an Ivy League school, right? That they're getting the best of the best, that they're walking into spaces that feel bright and encouraging and not like depressing and crumbling. But it's challenging to make movement like that in a government, in this business. But I think that we have to focus on that too. What does the environment feel like for people in their district and their units?
So if you were to give advice to a police leader in this current environment, what would be some of the key points of advice you would give to a person who's leading a large or a mid-sized or small police department today about officer wellness?
I would say grace. Have grace. That understand that most of the people that we are talking to or interacting today are doing the best they can, but do not have space to think a lot about themselves, have a lot of insight, that they're burdened. And so we have to think about that we're working really with like a fragile, not fragile like weak, but fragile group of people who are really on the brink, who are really, really escalated. And so what do we do as leadership to kind of dose kindness, reliability, transparency, et cetera, throughout our day? Because people want to see that.
Just talking to small groups of officers about their concerns, it was interesting that training was an important aspect of their wellness.
Right.
And I never made that connection till I heard some young cops talk about, I feel more confident when I receive training.
Right. Research says that about mental health training, that most law enforcement are the most uncomfortable and anxious walking into a domestic where they sense that there's a mental health component because they don't feel like they have adequate training. When we feel not powerful, when we don't feel equipped, we act in ways that are unlike ourselves. It's just human nature. And so bringing in somebody to audit all of your wellness programs, to give some grace, to think about, what are we doing from training, from every perspective, to think about how does this make officers feel competent. It's adult learning, right? It's all of that stuff. But yeah, it was interesting. They don't talk a lot about therapy, right? In the focus groups, they're talking about they want training, they want reform.
Right.
They just want to know what's coming.
So Alexa, when we talk about first responders, sometimes we forget to mention their families, the spouses, their kids, mothers and fathers of first responders. It really is a family affair when it comes to policing. What are some of the things you would advise families to look for when their first responders are acting a certain way or had a difficult day or they were in a traumatic experience? Yeah,
oh my God, I love this question because we heal in our families, we heal in our communities. So one of the recommendations would always be that upon recruitment, when you come into this department, you recognize who is my support person and you tell somebody at the academy. Because it's not always your spouse, right?
That's right.
Right? You identify who makes you feel better. And then we, the department, bring those people in and we train them. And we say, this is what it's going to look like after a traumatic incident. This is what it could look like. This is what kind of a grounding exercise could be. And then we bring them together and say, all right, Superintendent Brown, what do you want after a hard day? And you may say, I want to be left alone. I don't want anybody to talk to me.
Right.
And I may say, I want everybody around me. Right? So you start expectation setting immediately. Because what often happens is there's a lot of disconnect that happens over time in policing with your loved one who is not in law enforcement. I don't want to burden you with my day. There's too much trauma. You shouldn't know this. I don't want you to be scared. But then you're disconnected from people who heal you. So my recommendation is treat them like the family that they're invited into this department to be. Give them access to resources and let them know that they also have access to EAP. They also can call and make a referral on their loved one, and that they should be able to develop those relationships and feel really safe and confident doing so.
Yeah, I love that answer because not every circumstance can be treated the same.
Yes.
That there's not a cookie cutter solution to officer wellness.
Right.
The law enforcement kind of dirty little secret is officer suicides. Many more suicides in law enforcement than in the line of duty deaths. So, number one, let's talk about it. Number two, what can we do about it?
It's such a tragic ending to hopelessness. I think we really have to understand it and understand what is the driving force. I don't think it's the job. I think that trauma is cumulative. And if we don't kind of get rid of it on a day-to-day basis, it builds up, and it makes everything else in our world feel astronomically more hopeless and challenging, like home life, financial situations, etc. So what we do about it is we talk about it immediately. You just start to normalize it. You talk about it in the academy. We talk about it with leadership. We don't penalize for it, right? If people are talking about their own wellness. And we also have to remember that suicide and mental illness are not the same thing.
That's right.
Right? That many people are just feeling so overwhelmed and so burdened by their life that they don't want to live anymore. And that's a different situation. So what I would say is we have to keep reiterating this message that this is a moment. It may be a long moment, but this is a moment. And that there are resources and that people will have your back. And there are ways to discreetly have these conversations. And we have seen it many times at NAMI, many times with the EAP, that people have gotten better. And those people have to feel safe enough to tell their fellow officers, I did it, I felt where you were, and look at me now.
So those who struggle need to talk more, and we start that talking by you and I talking about it, and it being okay for others to talk about it, so that we might just save one officer from making that awful, awful choice.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And this feeling of isolation is really contagious right now with COVID. But there are so many people who are feeling really low right now in a whole lot of pain, and we ask your officers every day to respond to those calls. And so we just want to remind your membership that there are a lot of people who love them and that will show up for them on the other end as well.
Thanks, Alexa. Thank you so much.